Hey guys, so today we're going to be talking about how to start building rhythm and kind of understanding rhythm. So when you first start trying to make beats, this is what I kind of see a lot. I see a lot of kind of a little of that and a little of this, and this is kind of what you get out of that. And that's because we don't really have a whole lot of direction here. We're just kind of throwing in a bunch of stuff. It's actually got a little bit of groove to it, but you know that's the bottom line. That's the important word here is groove. And when you start just kind of clicking stuff in, it's hard to get a groove that people are actually going to kind of grab onto, you know, and that's really important. So it's important to understand what goes into actually building these rhythms out. The first thing I want to mention is we have our tempo up here and we have a metronome right here, which is going to help you anchor yourself in the track that you're actually working on. So the metronome clicks in a quarter note pattern, and we're going to talk about what that means in a second. The tempo dictates how fast or slow your track actually is. Now, first I just want to go through the different kinds of notes that we can actually use. Basically, how this is labeled, it's labeled by the division of the bar that we're working in. So if we talk about, we'll start with a whole note, right? A whole note is going to look like this. It's going to take up the whole bar, whole note, the whole thing. That's what a whole note sounds like. And now we just start dividing it in half, and each note is going to be named accordingly, right? So this is going to be, these are half notes because they're each taking up half a bar. Or quarter notes, which is also what our metronome will sound at, which will help ground you in the song. Then we also have eighth notes and 16th. Now, technically, you could continue to divide these up from, 16th to 32nd to 64th notes, but we're not going to worry about that today because this is an intro video and we don't need to worry about those kinds of notes right now. So it's important to know what these are because as we talked about in the last video, each of these instruments, percussion instruments, has sort of a certain role that's going to, a certain role that it functions as. Now, I quickly want to go over sort of the language that we use when we're referring to any one of these steps, vocally, because that's really important for understanding what I'm talking about when I say certain things. Like when we're counting this is our 1, this is our 2, this is our 3, this is our 4. And you kind of like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? If we draw in eighth notes, everything in between our 1, 2, 3, and 4 is going to be an and. So it's going to sound like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, right? Everything in between that, this is going to be an E, and this is going to be an A, or an I say E and So E, 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 goes between the downbeat, which is the 1, 2, 3, 4, and the offbeat, which was everything in between those, right? I know that gets a little tricky to look at, but this is what that sounds like. Remember, this is an E and this is an and the reason that is because it kind of flows off the tongue in a way that you can do it quickly. So this is going to sound like this. It's going to be 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E. I can't even do it. 1E and a 2E. That's kind of difficult. Anyway, you get the idea. 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and notice the 1, the 2, the 3, and the 4 are still landing in the same spot. All of the ands are still landing in the same spot. So if I say to you, drop a note down on the and of 4, you know that you can put it right here because here's our 4 and that would be the and of 4, right? If I say the A of 2, that would be here's our 2, 2, E, and right? So that's why this is important. It's a pretty simple system, but it's an easier way to communicate what notes we're actually talking about within this bar that we have here, right? So you're going to want to use your metronome to keep you grounded. For example, when you don't have a hi-hat that's on, a hi-hat or some instrument, doesn't have to be a hi-hat. When you don't have something grounding your rhythm, that's where the metronome can come in handy, because you want to make sure that you're always staying within the confines of the time signature that you're working in, right? So that's what the metronome is great for. So let's actually throw some stuff together, right? Let's do an eighth note pattern on our hi-hat. Our kick, we're going to put on the 1, the and of 3, and the and of 4. And the snare, we'll put on the 2 and the 4. And the percussion, we'll do on the A of 1, and of 2, and we'll do the same thing. A of 3, and of 4. And the tambourine, let's do on the 1, 2, 3, 4, on the downbeats. Right? Now let's see what this sounds like. So that sounds pretty cool, right? Now you're gonna come up with things, and once you realize what some of these rhythms sound like individually, like we can get a very different feel out of this. For example, if we change the snare on the 2 and the 4 to just on the 3. It sounds kind of slower, right? That's called halftime. So the difference between halftime or standard time or even double time, putting the snare on the ands of everything, that would be considered double time. So you can get a lot of different rhythms out of here, and I've actually listed a bunch for you to try within this lesson. It's really important to spend some time fooling around with this, but do things with intent and purpose, because like I said, a lot of the time you end up looking at stuff like this when you're first starting out, and this doesn't, you're not going to be as happy with something like that. It's important to start slow. Like snare on the 2 and the 4 is always great. Some of maybe the hi-hat on the 1, 2, 3, 4. Start simple, You'd be surprised at the practical application that you can get out of a simple beat like that, So start slow, pump the brakes. If you find yourself doing things randomly, stop yourself and ask yourself, are you actually accomplishing anything with clicking some of these notes in just kind of all over the place, Try it on the offbeats here. Like that's something that we can make a song out of, right? So it's important to kind of practice this and practice knowing what all of these notes are, right? This is the and. We have A of the 1, and of 2, the A of 3, and of 4. Then we have the 1, 2, 3, 4 here. We have the 2 and the 4 here, and the 1. It's pretty simple, but it's important to be able to identify those in a way that if we're talking about it, you understand what I'm saying, or I understand what you're saying. If I say put the kick on the E of the 3, then I know, oh, here's the 3, here's the E, boom. Yeah, easy enough, right? So that's something that you really want to spend a little bit of time with, practice, and when you've got a little bit of time to go through some of these sounds and practice making some of these rhythms, try different tempos, you can go on over to the next lesson where we're going to start talking a little bit about how to build some chords to go with some of this stuff.